Welcome to Tennessee Court Talk. I'm your host, Barbara Peck. This episode is intended for all audiences and is a collaboration with the Tennessee Judicial Opioid Initiative. Today we are discussing the impact of the opioid and drug addiction crisis on children. All three of our guests work tirelessly every day to protect Tennessee children. Our first guest is Tabatha Curtis. She is with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and is the statewide coordinator for the Tennessee Alliance for Drug-Endangered Children. Our second guest is Amy Coble. She is the State Director of Investigations for the Tennessee Department of Children's Services and is also a partner with the Tennessee Alliance for Drug-Endangered Children. Our third guest is Judge Tim Brock, a general sessions and juvenile judge in Coffee County. He presides over the state's only family drug court and is one of the state's first safe baby courts. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So let's jump in and talk about the Alliance for Drug-Endangered Children. The Alliance was originally founded in 2006 with a focus on assisting children who were found living in homes where meth was being made. As the meth crisis changed, the Alliance became less active until recently. So Tabatha, tell us a little bit about what trends you were seeing that reactivated or inspired the Alliance to get going again.
Well, the Alliance was established in 2006 due to the meth crisis, but over the years, because there was no capacity and there was no sustainability through funding, the Alliance just kind of faded out. But as the opioid epidemic and the federal funding and all became more available, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations and Tennessee Dangerous Drug Task Force reactivated the Alliance and applied for a grant. And we received a grant through the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, and it was $1 million grant for a 3-year period. During this first year is our planning phase, and probably beginning in October, we will start our implementation phase. But because of the funding available to fight the opioid epidemic and to work with children and families, we were able to reactivate the Alliance and have things going more in a forward position. However, our advisory board was always still meeting and working together. We just didn't have any funding to move us forward.
And Amy, tell us about, was DCS excited to hear the Alliance was going to get re-energized?
Absolutely. I became a part of the Alliance about 4 years ago. And since that time, it has really impacted a lot of the work that we've been doing across the state. And it's also given us the opportunity to look at different ways and strategies that we could help families with their substance use disorders.
Let's talk a second about what dangers there are for children who are living in an environment with drugs.
Sure. So just so you know, we had in 2018 over 56,000 cases that were called into the department for drug-exposed child allegation, which is a significant number for children that are in the community. So the safety and risk to children who are exposed is really, really high because drugs affect the parent's ability to parent, first of all, and then it affects them in a way that they can no longer provide a safe and nurturing home. So that's concerning for us in that capacity. Also, we also find that drug use in homes contributes to a lot of the mental health, physical disabilities, and also there's a lot of domestic violence issues that come along with these particular allegations. So any of those children who are exposed to drugs are generally at high risk for any type of physical or emotional issues. They're also at greater risk for suffering from addiction issues later. So we wanted to make sure that we address the issue early on so that we can have better outcomes for these children.
Judge Brock, what kind of impact has the opioid crisis had on courts?
Well, it's had a tremendous impact, and not just the opioid crisis, but since I came on the bench in 1990, drug abuse, alcohol abuse has been probably the most significant factor in all of the cases that we see, ranging from our civil docket to our criminal docket, particularly with our dependency, neglect, and child welfare dockets and child custody dockets. It began with the cocaine crisis in the 90s and changed to the methamphetamine crisis in the 2000s, and that evolved into the opioid crisis with the last 8 to 10 years, and then that's changing again into a new methamphetamine crisis, kind of like your newer, better, more intense methamphetamine that's being laced with fentanyl and other opioids. So it's a constantly moving crisis, but the one thing that's consistent is that it has been a crisis for the 29 years that I've been on the bench, and it's had devastating effects for families and children who are being parented by parents who are addicted.
What kind of issues do you see with parents who have drug addiction in their relationship with their children?
Well, you go back to the nature of addiction. Addiction is a chronic brain disease, and what it does to the brain, and it affects the ability of a person to use sound and good judgment. It literally changes your brain chemistry and prevents you from making those, giving you the ability to make those good judgment decisions. So almost by definition, someone who's addicted to this substance or these substances does not have the ability to make good decisions to parent a child. So, and it's particularly acute with infants when you're having to constantly care for a child. So it begins with the nature of the disease itself.
And what are some of the biggest misconceptions about identifying drug-endangered children, Tabatha?
In my opinion, for that, I would think that they all come from a certain socioeconomic background, that they're growing up in these impoverished homes and uneducated parents and so forth. And that is not necessarily the case, especially with the opioid crisis. We've seen it through every socioeconomic background, and it can be any kind of parent. It could be your mom driving the mom van to soccer practice, or the basketball coach, or whomever, that this opioid crisis has affected all backgrounds.
And Amy, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions of identifying these children are?
Actually, I have to agree with Tabatha. It is that stigma that this comes from poverty-stricken families, and that's not necessarily the case anymore. Even, it's not just the opioid crisis, but all types of drugs. We've seen a lot of drug use with a lot of different types of families, and so it's not just hitting the poverty-stricken families anymore. It is definitely a crisis amongst all socioeconomic status of people.
So why is it so important that there's a coordinated response?
Well, that would be to have a coordinated response. That's why you have all your multidisciplines working together. It's not just people working in their silos anymore. It's not just saying it's the responsibility of DCS to take care of these children. Although, they are the experts in the case, I feel like, but it's everyone working together to benefit the children. In other words, it's the village, it's your law enforcement, it's DCS, it's your substance abuse prevention coalitions, it's judicial, it's treatment, it's recovery. Having everyone working together to build a safety net for these children and to provide wraparound services for the families, because we know if a parent or guardian has a substance abuse issue, it not only impacts them, but impacts the entire family.
One of the things that we're finding is that with this collaboration that we're establishing, we are finding that we are identifying the concerns faster with these families. And so therefore we're able to get the services to them faster and have better outcomes. And so I feel like what Tabatha is talking about, the multidisciplinary approach, that is very significant in the work that we're doing across the state with all different communities. The reason that that's also impactful is because every community is very unique. So you have to have every partner willing to come to the table and discuss what strategies they need to use in order to better meet the outcomes of the families in that community.
One of the things Alliance is really trying to do is provide education. What kind of partners are you looking for, and who are you trying to educate on this issue?
Everyone. Everyone in the entire state, in the communities. And as Amy just said, every community is different. And we have been providing training since January. And since January, we have trained over 618 people. And that is multidiscipline. That is from law enforcement to teacher in services to DCS to your guidance counselors, anyone that invites us out, we are there to provide that training. And we are building on that training by using our substance abuse coalitions across the state, because they are the hub, or should be the hub in their community, and they already have those people at the table to build that capacity. Typically, they would already have DCS at their table sitting there in law enforcement, and by using them, you don't have to go in and recreate the wheel. You've already got it there, and you don't waste a lot of time trying to build that bridge.
What is the goal of the training? Are you trying to have partners help identify these children, or what are you training them on?
Well, first of all, you're training them on the awareness part of it is the drug trends. That's a big part of it. And I know Amy and I have been working probably for the past 2 years, and I would go in and work with her and doing some of her trainings across the state. But when she brings them in, we go in and do drug trends, drug awareness of these issues, of the environmental chaos that these kids are growing up in, as Amy said, the domestic violence, the lack of necessities, just letting people know of what's happening in these homes where these children are growing up in, and then training them on how can we all work together, what can we share. I'm better because you're better, just sharing our resources and helping each other, whether it be law enforcement. And, they're usually the first responders there at the homes, and then having DCS come in and having that communication. Again, developing a timeline, talking to teachers and sharing with them, signs to look for, and talking about the necessity of mandatory reporting, and all across, not just teachers, but everyone across the counties and within the cities about the mandatory reporting. Don't just turn your head. It's important you can't be investigated if it's not reported.
And what kind of reports are you seeing?
We have seen an abundance of reports, especially in our school systems. And we, of course, see trends when the school begins and when school ends. However, I do want to touch a little bit about the education piece and how we are working, how the Department of Children's Services is working with many, many people to establish an educational workshop for all of the community partners. So for the last 2 years, I, along with a team of people, have been going out. Tabatha is one of them. And we've created a workshop where we talk about information about how addiction affects the brain. We talk with someone who gives a personal testimony, as well as how this all ties back into child welfare. This has been significantly important in the rural communities. As we're going out in those rural communities, we have a lot of those communities who have no sense of what their addiction issue is in the community, what the drug epidemic is in their community. And we're finding that with this education piece, that it's a real eye-opener for them, so that they can understand what this means in their community and how they need to report that to the department.
And what resources are available to the partners that you're training?
Absolutely. So anytime that there is a concern for a drug-exposed child in a home, then we ask everybody in the community to, as Tabatha were talking about, it's mandatory reporting. And so they would need to notify the Department of Children's Services, and there's a 1-800 number for that. It's 877-237-0004. Also, in conjunction with that, we also want them to contact law enforcement. So at the same time that law enforcement responds, which we are working on coordinated efforts with law enforcement as well, so that not only do they respond, but the department responds with them.
And Judge Brock, when does the court system get involved with drug-exposed children?
The court system officially gets involved once a petition has been filed by the Department of Children's Services, or in some cases by a family member or friend or someone with knowledge of particular circumstances of a child. So upon the filing of the petition, the court is officially involved at that point.
And what's happening, Amy, before that petition's filed? What sort of work is DCS doing in advance?
So we would open up an investigation, and we would start our investigation and collect as much evidence as we possibly can. And once we make that determination that the child needs either legal action or to be brought in the Department of Children's Services custody, we're also providing services at the same time. So there should not be a lapse in services and or legal involvement at that point.
Barbara, that's one of the things that we're providing in our training is for law enforcement and others is to assist DCS. And when they're there on the scene is how to identify children and signs of children and the collection of evidence that it would be useful to help them to build their case.
How are you using community-based partnerships to expand your reach and mission?
Well, again, that's where we're going out and using the substance abuse prevention coalitions, because they should have those sectors at their table, including your faith-based organizations, your healthcare, your judicial, DCS. And our goal is to establish 6, that is what our grant funding is for, 6 response or action teams across the state. And in doing that, that is using those community partners to collaborate together and to provide wraparound services for these families. Again, it may be that, working with the judges that, okay, this is a family that needs to have this parent into treatment. But we also need to be talking to DCS and talking about, what do these children need? What is the plan for them. Where do we need to do whatever it takes to make sure that that child is being rescued from the environment that they're currently in. Looking at the coalitions and having someone there that can coordinate these services for these families. It may be that the children are needing, to have shoes or clothing, or it may, they don't have the school supplies and things, but providing whatever that child needs to make sure that they're going to be successful.
So talk a little about wraparound services. What exactly is that?
Wraparound services would be meeting all needs of the child, whether it be that they may need mental health assessment or treatment. It may be that they need, like personal hygiene products. It may need the school, just providing every component to what that child needs.
Yeah, and I would say looking at each individual child and their need, sometimes people think of cookie cutter things, and that's okay. But when you go into each individual family, there are specific things that they need. And those children, they will let you know. As soon as you have intervention with them, they're going to let you know what that is. Particularly, also, we need to think about working with these relatives that are taking the children in. It used to be a scary thing when the department got involved, but no longer, because one of the exciting things is that the department has a lot of opportunity to offer great services to families. If we coordinate this really well, we can actually help that child, that family. And even if the child isn't returned to the parent, if that caretaker has enough support systems in place, they can successfully help this child all the way to their adulthood, which is an exciting time for the department to be able to say that.
What should you do if you have an adult child who has their own children who you suspect are being drug exposed, if you're a relative?
Well, you should automatically report that to the Department of Children's Services. I do know there are some families that can handle these situations on their own. I understand that. They have, good support systems in place. However, if there is any type of drug use that you feel like is putting a child at risk or a safety to themselves, then that needs to be reported to the department.
So what kind of legal issues arise when over time a sort of an informal arrangement has come about? So for example, maybe the grandchildren are spending 2 days a week and then it's 4 days a week. And now all of a sudden we're very slowly, pretty much the grandparents have basically taken over guardianship of the kids, but nothing's been formalized. The department hasn't been involved. The court hasn't involved. What kind of issues come up then, Judge Brock?
Well, the obvious issues are whether or not that person has authority to act on behalf of the child. Do you have the authority to consent to medical treatment, to enroll the child in school, those types of issues. So I would encourage folks to address that early on and take action to get that authority. There are powers of attorney. There are ways to do that don't involve court action. Of course, you could always come to court, and if you could show that this child was a neglected or dependent child, then the court would give you, and you were the appropriate placement, the court would give you authority to act on behalf of the child. But to do that preemptively rather than waiting until a crisis occurs with the child. I would strongly encourage folks to do that preemptively and not wait until that crisis occurs.
So what happens when there is a crisis and they show up on your courtroom door?
We have that occur quite frequently, and they're not able to get medical treatment. They can't. When I get back to the office, I'm sure we will have several petitions filed where people have not been able to get their children into school. School's starting, and they are raising their grandchildren, or they're friends of raising their friends' children, and they're not able to enroll them in school, and they'll be at the courthouse door wanting an order. You just can't give those orders out without some going through some process. They're not things that we just distribute. So it takes a little time to get those. You can't just have them issued immediately, usually, unless there's an imminent risk of danger to a child. So I would encourage people to act preemptively on that.
And Amy, what happens so I think people are scared when they feel like the Department of Children's Services is getting involved. So what is your advice, I think, if you're a grandparent or an aunt or whoever, and you're sort of informally arranged, engaged with a child, but you, taking Judge Brock's advice, need to formalize this relationship, but you're really nervous about making that initial call?
Sure. I think the face of the department has changed a lot over the last several years, and we have a better understanding of what substance use disorders are and how they are affecting families. And instead of being punitive or taking punitive action, which I think that's what most people felt back in the day, we are really taking a strengths-based treatment approach with our families. So I think that with that being the case, that they need to understand that we are going to help them. We're going to identify services that we're going to help the family, help the child, and also provide the treatment that their own child needs in order to be successful.
And let's talk a little bit about safe baby courts and family drug court, Judge Brock. So why did you start a family drug court, and what was your goal with being one of the first safe baby court judges?
At any one time in Tennessee, there are between 8,000 and 9,000 children in foster care. Most of those children are in foster care because their parents, one or both of their parents, are addicts. That's the great majority of those cases. In addition to those cases, there are at least that many, probably substantially more children who are in the care of a relative or an acquaintance or a friend. So the scope of this problem is enormous. When you're looking at cases between 75 and 85% of your child welfare cases being addiction related, and you do the math, you can see the scope of the problem. And I saw that in our courtroom each day. It was overwhelming. So safe baby courts and family treatment courts are a way to address that elephant that's in the room. Family treatment courts and safe baby courts to some degree. Safe baby courts are a little bit different. They deal with children 0 to 3. It's not technically a recovery court as a family treatment court is, but because the population that you're addressing are people who are addicted, you necessarily use those same principles. Recovery courts that use in the criminal justice setting are the best program that's ever been created in the history of criminal justice programs. There's nothing that's ever worked even close to the success rate of recovery courts. Family treatment courts use those same principles. And so it just made sense to me that if we're doing something, and I've been involved in criminal court, drug recovery courts for quite some time, if we're doing something that's working well with folks who are addicted, and I've seen it work. I've seen families put back together. I've seen people reclaim their lives. I've seen people become parents and brothers and sisters, and I've seen it work time after time after time. So if it's working there, let's take those same principles and let's use them in this child welfare setting. We still have the leverage of the court, although we don't have jail as a sanction that we would in criminal recovery court. But we do the motivation to not lose your child, not have your parental rights terminated. That's a powerful motivation. So let's use that, and let's use the family treatment court model and hopefully have some of the same success we've had in the criminal justice setting. And there are a lot of studies across the country that are showing you're having the same success. It's become one of the most effective civil justice programs in the history of civil justice programs. And so we take some of those same principles and we kind of overlay that onto Safe Baby Court, which is a collaborative effort between the Department of Children's Services, Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, the Administrative Office of the Courts, and the Juvenile Courts to address those issues, to reunify children with their parents where possible, but the overall goal being placing a child in a permanent safe home, hopefully with their natural biological parents, but if not, with someone else.
And almost all of the children, or literally all of the children in Safe Baby Court, are drug-exposed children.
All of them in our Safe Baby Court is, and from my anecdotal conversations with other judges, and Amy probably has some statistics, but I would say 95 to 99% of them fall into that category.
So Safe Baby Courts are fairly new to Tennessee. Amy, how is the department using them?
We are implemented in 5 counties, and we have another 6 counties that we're going to have up and going. The department is using them for early intervention with families so that we can help them identify early on the services that they need to keep them in a healthy environment. And sometimes that's placing the child with other relatives, as the judge was talking about. Sometimes it's keeping the child in the family home and providing services and all the wraparound services that we can to keep that child in that home environment. So I also think that, Safe Baby Courts are a great way because a great way for families to identify exactly what they need, but they're also being held accountable. So the more that they go in front of a judge and they see the judge praises them for their accomplishments, that praise sends a significant message to those particular family members. And they are very proud of themselves, and you can see it in their face, and you can see in the outcomes.
One of the things that we teach in our education and awareness is it's never too early to intervene, but it's never too late as well. And, I think we see that with the Safe Baby Courts, that early intervention and the impact that it can have. Of course, as these children grow in these environments, if there's not been any intervention, we know the emotional and complex issues that they have.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Alliance. So what if a school district or coaches want to learn more? What do they do, Tabatha?
They can contact us at the Tennessee Dangerous Drug Task Force, and we will try to fit them in our schedule. We've never had to turn anyone down as of yet, but as we continue to create our awareness and sustainability of the Alliance across the state, I'm sure we will continue to have additional requests. But so far, we have not had any reason to turn anyone down, and would love to train as many people and share the collaboration and the possibility of collaborating resources within your own community. Again, with all eyes in a community, and every community looking a little bit different, and we encourage everyone when they do have like trainings that they bring a multidiscipline, bring someone to the table so everyone's hearing the same thing, and it can have the domino effect that you can go out and share what you've just learned with the others and say, we can do this. We can be there for our kids, whether it's establishing a handle with care program between your law enforcement and your schools, letting them to know to handle that child with care today because of a situation that might have happened in the home last night. It's not as much about sharing the information, again, but it's just letting the educators, law enforcement, everyone be aware of the situations.
And what can they expect when they sign up for a training or they contact you? How long is the training? And what should they expect?
We can do a training anywhere from 30 minutes to 90 minutes to an all-day training. It depends on exactly what your community is wanting, and it depends on if our partners are available to join with us that day. But typically, they're going to get drug trend training, drug-endangered children awareness, and they're also going to get Department of Children's Services coming along board with us to share their information and what they can provide. Again, as Amy said, the face of DCS is changing over the few years. And the time that Amy and I have worked together, we're going in as a team. We're going in to say, we're here to help. We're here to give you a hand. To help you get into treatment, to help you to maintain recovery, sharing information like with the Tennessee Lifeliners, who were funded through the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, assisting them into treatment, being there to share their resources for recovery meetings after they come out of treatment, being there to work with, the family resource centers or the child advocacy centers, working together for those children.
And so, Judge Brock, what can judges do to help drug-exposed children? Should they be asking if there's children in the home every time a case is suspected of drugs?
Well, I think one thing judges can do is to become educated about the nature of addiction. And because if you don't understand that process, it's difficult to move the case along in a way that fosters rehabilitation and the parents' efforts to get their chronic disease under control. So education is important, and I think we're doing a good job of that. We need to continue to do that as well. Judges need to ask questions. Judges need to understand that when you have custody cases, when you have even some children's services petitions that may not have alleged drug abuse, sometimes you may want to ask some questions. There are red flags with mental health issues and drug abuse issues go hand in hand. Domestic violence issues, drug abuse, alcoholism, it goes hand in hand. So sometimes you need to ask some more questions. You may need to say, well, maybe we need to have an assessment done for this. So I think to ask questions, be aware of the circumstances in which these issues come up, and educate yourself on how to properly respond to them.
Can judges make a referral to DCS?
Yes, we do it all the time. We have standard form orders, and I make multiple referrals each week.
Amy, let's say it again because I don't feel like we can say it enough times. What should someone do if they suspect a child has been exposed to drugs or is living in a home with drugs?
They need to go ahead and call that into the child abuse hotline as soon as they have this information, 1-877-237-0004.
Thank you. And thank you all for being a guest on Tennessee Court Talk today.
Thank you.
Thank you.